Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the moderator of our next session and president of Indian River Consulting Group, Michael Marks.
They're putting our chairs up here. We're having, this is almost getting to be a regular thing, you know, doing these little panel discussions and talking about the industry. This week is my 30th anniversary as a consultant, which means I'm pretty much unemployable by anything else. But I have enjoyed my time with this industry. The first time I spent time here was 1989. I was very excited about value-added distribution. That was the new thing. I'll make one comment about this industry. As most of you know, I work in many other areas, and there are a lot of meetings you can go to where if you turn your back and walk out of the room, you're going to get a knife in it. One of the things that I really like about this industry, and I've made a lot of friends and done a fair amount of drinking along the way. Come on up, guys. Let's get ourselves all set up here. Done a lot of bar conversations here. I've actually made friends with people in this industry, and this is one of the few industries that I work in where you can still do a major business deal in a handshake, and it works. And it's one of the things, to me, if you kind of look at all the changes that we've been through, things get really, really crazy. And this is something I've really enjoyed being a part of and look forward to kind of continuing as I get older and goofier. And I've got several victims, and the victims are up here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But the thing that everybody has in common up here, and what's different this time, last year we talked to Dave Gabriel at Sonepar, who's now been promoted. He's now COO. And we talked about consolidation and where it's going. And this is Paul Harvey. Let me tell you the rest of the story. This is the value and the future of the independent. And that's one thing that everybody up here is in violent agreement. So Dan, we'll start with you. I'm going to ask each one of you to kind of introduce yourselves, just to let everybody know sort of who you are and how you got in this godforsaken business.
All right, ready?
Yep.
All right, my name is Dan Gray. I'm with Independent Electric Supply based out of Boston, Massachusetts. Member of AD and a member of NAED. It's great to be up here on a panel with some really, some big wigs, the heavy hitters up here. So I'm looking forward to having a little bit of contribution on this one.
Okay, hey, my name is Bob Smith. I'm with IMARK, and I think Michael asked us to tell a little bit how we got in the industry. So I joined the industry in 1985. Prior to that, I was in the medical field with a company called C.R. Bard. So my wife worked at United Technologies, and she was good friends with somebody who happened to work with Ken Hooper. Ken Hooper, who is now the president of NEMRA, at the time was the national sales manager at Passage Seymour. And for some of the younger folks, they may not know that Ken's father was Art Hooper, who Jim Risk is going to be honored with the Art Hooper Award. So Ken got me into this industry, and then I was there, with the exception of about 6 months, I was there 22 years in varied capacities, and then in 2007, I was fortunate enough to join the IMARK group. And by the way, it's great to be back in Boston because a little over 20 years ago, I actually won Boston.
You won the Boston Marathon that Ed was talking about?
Well, actually, it was the National Boston NAED Fun Run. And Christine DeStiger came in first for the women. But that was national news to me.
I run about as often as I win the lottery. John?
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm John Spoor with State Electric Supply based out of Huntington, West Virginia. I have a company that my partner, Clarence, and I acquired from its founder, Art Weisberg, in 2012. Art started the business in 1952. I actually started in the business in the very early 70s, in 1974, with a company called Nunn Electric Supply. They were in Houston, Texas, had a facility right next to the University of Houston campus, and I walked in there in the warehouse and got a job as I worked through college. I came back to West Virginia to do some additional schoolwork and walked into State Electric in 1979 and began my career there. So very happy to be on this panel. As Dan said, a rather illustrious group of talent up here, and look forward to the discussion that we're having today. So thank you for asking.
Thank you, John. George, I like the socks.
Thank you. George Vorwick with United Electric Supply, headquartered in Wilmington, Delaware. I got in this business in 1979. I was a junior in high school, and I got a little trouble with my father and was told I need to go find a job. And a week later, I was sweeping the parking lot, an electrical distributor about 4 miles from my house. It was the only place that would hire me, and it was close enough I could ride my bike.
It's good to have decision criteria.
Yeah. I'm awful pleased to be here in Boston. I want to thank Tom Neighbor for having this here in Boston. My youngest daughters are freshmen at Boston College, and my wife and I have the privilege of driving over there on Saturday and packing her up and moving her home.
I hope temporarily, right? Yeah, okay. Bill?
Hi, I'm Bill Weisberg, CEO at AD. Joined this industry when I was 22 years old. Got a job working at Progress Lighting as a area guy doing work down in the Maryland area. I learned a lot from the folks that were kind enough to hire me back then. I joined AD about 5 years later and became the CEO when I was 35. And over the course, that's a few years ago. And over the course of that time, I've had really a wonderful opportunity to make so many lifelong friends in this industry. Some of you are here. Most of my good friends were smart enough to skip this. And I would tell you that it's a true honor to be a part of the electrical industry. I'm very grateful to NAED for the things that they do to make this industry better on all of our behalf, and appreciate the leadership that Tom Neighbor provides. I'm hoping I can add a little bit of insight from some of the other industries and countries that we participate in too. About half of our business is electrical, and our electrical business includes operations in Canada and Mexico. And Canada is a very interesting way to look at this issue of independence and change because of the high degree of consolidation in that market, and some other industry stuff too. So I think we're going to try to make it entertaining for you all and keep it moving.
Well, so I mean, the real question here, and I know that all of you feel strongly about it, is there was sort of a sense in many people that the industry is going to continue to consolidate. And a lot of the folks running the big companies had the view we're going to end up like electronics or lab products where there's 2 or 3 distributors that hold 90% of the market. But you guys all seem to feel pretty confident that the independent has a long-term future. I'd just like to kind of get a sense from each of you, why do you believe that's true other than the fact that you want it to be true? You know, John, how about you? I mean, what's your take?
Sure. One is, I think if you just look at the market itself, it's still very fractured. I mean, there's a lot of needs out there. So I think the fact that the independent has, I think, a very focused access point in their market. I think their intimacy with the customer is very strong. I think that electrically, there's a certain risk associated with the proper application of electrical products. So I think there's a number of needs that have to be met out there from a knowledge standpoint, from a service standpoint, certainly, speed to market. So I think smart independents can certainly have a future in that, because there still is a very unstructured end user market out there that has many, many needs.
All right, Dan, how about you?
Well, I would tell you that I think that the independents that I see out in the marketplace within AD and within IMARK are innovative groups. Some of them are family businesses. They're doing what they love. They have a passion for it. It's not a hobby. It's not just doing it to make a paycheck. They're building something. And, you know, we're in Boston, so it's an independent theme, and the company is Independent Electric. But there's a lot of independence in being a distributor that is like that, and your ability to make an adjustment on the fly and to move into different market segments, get there before the larger players, and develop those key relationships with your local marketplace is a huge key to being an independent.
George, how about you? What's your take? You've been at this a while.
Well, I agree that as long as electrical contractors are buying a lot of electrical equipment, They're entrepreneurial minded, they are very much fragmented, and they don't like to be told who they need to do business with.
What do you mean?
Well, they have strong feelings about the folks who are serving them, and they have a lot of loyalty to those folks. And as long as you're taking care of your customers and your employees who take care of the customers, I think there's room for a lot of different types of distribution.
Bill, what's your take?
Well, I'm pretty bullish on the future for independents, and we've been watching their success for many years, over 30 years, and I think the business model works. And when you talk, we're talking in generalizations, right?
Exactly.
So things aren't, that we're going to talk about aren't universally true, they're generally true. And generally speaking, the independent has a very successful model and demonstrates that with their ability to grow at above industry rates on average year in and year out. And this is true in every industry that we're in. There are manufacturers here that track this very carefully, that the business with independents grows at about 1.5 times the rate of others in this industry. So why is that, right? And I think it's because there are challenges associated with size. So large companies have certain advantages, but they also have certain size-related challenges when it comes to execution and management and the ability to respond to things that are happening in the local market. It's hard to run a big company. All of you manufacturers know this. It's great to be big, but it's tough to be big too. And independents have challenges associated with being small, but they also have tremendous advantages associated with that size too. So when you look at that and you weigh that, it turns out that the independent is able to compete and win successfully time in and time again. They have an ownership infused culture, and that is something that that you obviously drive with your ESOP to ensure that people act and think like owners. You got passion, you have a high degree of work ethic. There's a focus, responsiveness, nimbleness, and you add all that up, and it's a winning formula. So I think independents who want it and who go after it will be successful and will continue to grow.
So you're confident in the model itself?
Yes.
In addition to the rest of it. Bob, what's your take?
Well, it's tough to disagree with anything that's been said, but consolidation is going to continue unabated. I mean, that's just the fact of life. And I think that, consolidation is not also with just and only, the multinationals. I mean, certainly, and I'm sure Bill has the same thing within AD, but within our group, I just did a look, and between 2011 and 2016, we were able to, not saying we're solely responsible for it, but we've been able to keep about $400 million of purchases of approved suppliers, which translates to double that in volume out the door, or more than double out the door. We've been able to keep that within the group by fellow members buying other members. So I think that was good. I think also that, I did a little studying on, and it's not exactly to the electrical, but the SBA, which is 500 employees or less, since the 80s, small businesses have added about to 49% growth, just in over what it was. And since 1990, large companies have reduced net on net employees by over 4 million, while small businesses have added 8 million. So I think some of that entrepreneurship as larger companies in the electrical industry, larger independents, because the only thing that's keeping them from continuing, because they clearly are good at what they do, and they clearly are targets for consolidation, it's incumbent upon them, and I know we'll talk later about that they have some type of succession plan, whether it's to do what United did and become an ESOP, or is their family in the business that is capable of taking over that business, or can they do something with another independent? So I think it's incumbent, I believe that the independents are going to continue to thrive, and it's not going to be anywhere 90%. It will continue to grow consolidation, but I believe also the suppliers have a vested interest in the independent continuing to thrive.
I think there's a lot to it. I remember when I was talking about getting involved here in 1989, and I'm probably getting my numbers wrong, but I think the median size of an electrical distributor out of the PAR report back then was like $13 million.
Right.
Half or smaller. right? And the numbers are like, I think it's like 75 million now today. But what you just brought up to me is there's a business model of being an independent distributor, but that is separate and apart from the whole consolidation trend, because a lot of the consolidation is happening with the independents. So it's a business model thing.
Michael, that's a great point. I don't think we shouldn't confuse viability with consolidation. You know, a lot of the smaller independents that I'll talk to, their succession plan was to sell the organization. It wasn't that the company's not viable, or it's the difficulty of developing leader. Right? So if you have a small company and you don't have anyone to hand it off to,
my son wants to be a rock and roll star kind of thing.
And you weren't able to develop leaders, which is very difficult for any size company.
Yeah.
That's your next best option to extract the value out of your organization. But that shouldn't be confused with their ability to remain viable as independent distributors. I find that they're really good at taking care of their customers, and they're passionate people who understand how to serve customers.
So, and Dan brought up a point in the beginning when I was talking about why you guys cared about it, and part of what you were talking about, Dan, was this speed of responding to changes in the market. How do customers experience it? I mean, if you look at people coming in a counter, even on a big commercial job with a lot of bids, how do customers look at independence versus change? I mean, are there any differences that you see?
Any of the independents that are here would tell you the customers like to be able to pick up the phone and call the person in charge, and more importantly, the owner, have a conversation, and you can make an adjustment. If there's something wrong, you got to stick to your core values. You got to do what's right for the customer, do what's right for your business, and do what's right for you. If you stick with those three things when you're dealing with an issue, you can resolve it instantly. It's not a layer thing that you have to go through. I can't fix that now. I've got to get other people involved. The independents that are in the Boston marketplace, and there are a bunch of really good, strong ones, and they're all growing. There are AD guys and IMARK guys. They're growing 8% a quarter. We're growing because we have that ability to connect with the customer. Like George said, customers, electrical guys, really want to be able to do what they want to do. They want to drive their bus. And they like to have that opportunity to have the conversation with the independent people.
What do some of the rest of you guys think of it? What have you seen with customers looking at it from their point of view when they look at?
I would certainly echo Dan's thoughts.
John, go ahead, John.
I'm sorry. I think that that customer intimacy is very, very important. So I don't think there's a huge differentiator in terms of necessarily what, in this case, a large national might be, because it's going to vary. As Bill said, this is not a uniform application. This is this is generalized. So I think they're very successful opportunities in the market that the nationals serve and that the independents serve. I think the element you're trying to get at is what does the customer see in terms of a difference? And I would echo what Dan says. I think just an intimacy of leadership, I think a culture, I think culture is extremely important. So I think a culture that they sense is going to do everything that they can to meet their needs. And the reality is a credit issue. There's no question that a more closer connection with a credit relationship certainly provides a better connection to that end user. Many, and this is true of, I guess nationals as well as independents, but many customers have been supported by an owner that says, I want to take a chance on this fellow and see if he can be successful, and he's successful. And still today, that is rewarded. A lot of people don't necessarily think it's as much as what it might have been in the past, but there's still a lot of relationship that is driven by independents an owner making a decision. I want to help the sale. So I really do think you cannot underestimate that, and I think that actually that type of relationship is driven through the organization very effectively and strong.
That kind of supports what Bill was saying about that sort of entrepreneurial feel all the way through.
Right.
George, you had kind of a funny look in your face when you were talking about taking credit risk.
Well, I was actually thinking about the customer size and being able to call and pick up a phone and call somebody who can make something happen. And I'll share a good story and a not so good story. We had a good friend of mine. I've known him since I came to United Electric, and we're family friends, and works at a large general contracting firm. And we go out to dinner at least once a year, and with our spouses, and he loves the fact that if there is a problem, he can call me. And sometime over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be going to visit a customer who decided to move his business away from us some years ago because he felt that maybe we were too big for him.
Really?
So I'm putting my humble hat on. I'm going to go over there and apologize for whatever slight that we may have given to him, and see if we can prove that we are not so big.
Well, but I think this kind of goes back to kind of what Bob was saying. It's selling to customers the way they want to buy. I mean, it's so getting too big means you had too many rules. Is that
Well,
kind of?
He just felt that we weren't paying attention, and he had an issue, and wasn't sure that we took it seriously enough. And so we're certainly not United Electric's not a small distributor, but by no means are we large compared to some of the folks in this room. So we're kind of in that middle range where there's a customer who felt that we weren't responsive to his needs. But one of the reasons why he wants to come back is because he recognizes the services and our ability to perform. So I think someone from our company owes him an apology.